The most esteemed and absolutely infallible Galactic War Tribunal, self-proclaimed, had never witnessed such an egregious violation of protocol. Someone was laughing. The sound echoed through the crystalline chambers of Justice Station Delta, bouncing off walls engineered to amplify the gravitas of proceedings, not snickers from the human delegation. 300 representatives from various spacefaring civilizations shifted uncomfortably in their ergonomically designed seats, each crafted to accommodate everything from tentacles to plasma forms. The charged atmosphere crackled with the kind of tension usually reserved for supernovas or particularly contentious trade negotiations over coffee beans, Earth's most strategic resource according to 17 different species. At the center of this judicial circus stood the imposing tribunal chamber, its architecture best described as aggressively symmetric, because apparently justice needed to be reminded about balance through interior design. The judges' panel, composed of 9 of the most decorated legal minds in the galaxy, or at least those who'd submitted their applications on time, peered down at the proceedings through various sensory organs. Chief Justice Extelkatek of the Harmonious Hive Mind Collective, trying very hard to live up to their species' name, tapped their ceremonial gavel, a device that had evolved from a simple wooden hammer to a quantum-synchronized resonance inducer that could theoretically restore order across 11 dimensions. Unfortunately, it still couldn't quiet one smirking human general. "The charges," announced Sub-Prosecutor Zixel, their bioluminescent appendages flickering with righteous indignation, "are as follows: violation of 17 separate conventions on warfare, unauthorized deployment of psychological warfare tactics, and—" they paused for dramatic effect, "making a mockery of established combat protocols." The human general security detail, a single lieutenant with a datapad, seemed more interested in what appeared to be an ancient Earth game involving angry avians being launched at primitive structures. "Furthermore," continued Zixel, their voice reaching frequencies that made several crystalline beings vibrate in sympathy, "we have documented evidence of the accused using—" they checked their notes 3 times, "humor in battle." The gallery erupted in gasps. A methane-breathing delegate had to be escorted out after achieving a state of super agitation. The human lieutenant looked up from their game long enough to roll their eyes. Chief Justice Stilkirk raised all 4 primary appendages for silence. "This tribunal recognizes the severity of these accusations. War is a serious matter, governed by precise regulations, forms submitted in triplicate, and appropriate levels of solemnity." The general's expression suggested they found the entire proceeding about as serious as a quantum physics lecture delivered by a tap-dancing quark. As the prosecution began arranging their evidence, a process that involved no less than 6 different types of holographic projectors and one very confused intern who kept trying to plug a 5-dimensional data crystal into a 4-dimensional port, the human delegation's casual demeanor stood in stark contrast to the proceedings' pomposity. The gallery watched, fascinated and horrified, as the general actually put their feet up on the defense table, a piece of furniture that had been blessed by 3 different species' religious leaders to ensure its judicial purity. Several members of the eternal bureaucracy clutched their documentation pearls. "Before we proceed," Chief Justice Extelkatek announced, their secondary brains struggling to maintain diplomatic coherence, "does the accused wish to enter a plea?" The general finally stood, brushing off an invisible speck from their immaculately pressed uniform. The room held its collective breath, except for the silicon-based life forms who didn't breathe but paused their electron exchanges in solidarity. "Oh, I'm just dying to explain myself," the general replied, with the kind of smile that had preceded several historically significant misunderstandings between species. "But I believe protocol demands we hear the full list of charges first. Please, do continue. This is all absolutely fascinating." The sarcasm in their voice went right over the heads of most aliens present. except for the sarcasm-detecting specialists from Rigel 7, who had to be sedated after their readings went off the scale. As the prosecution fumbled with their presentation, the general's lieutenant finally put away their game, replacing it with what appeared to be a countdown timer. Nobody asked what it was counting down to. Sometimes, ignorance truly is bliss. The stage was set, the players were in position, and somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of space, a form was being filled out documenting this historic moment. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of what would become known as the day the paperwork caught fire. Metaphorically speaking, of course. The actual fire would come later. The prosecution's first holographic display flickered to life, showing what they considered damning evidence, battle formations that looked more like abstract art than military strategy. To the aliens' continued consternation, several junior officers in the gallery had started taking notes with disturbing enthusiasm. As we can clearly see, Sub-Prosecutor Zixel continued, their bioluminescence now pulsing in rhythm with their outrage, the accused implemented what they called Operation Party Crasher during the Centauri conflict. The name alone violates Section 47.3b of the appropriate military operation naming convention. The general's smile widened fractionally. Really? We almost went with Operation Your Shields Are Showing, but figured that might be too on the nose. A ripple of confusion passed through the alien delegates. The literal translation corps worked overtime trying to explain why shields couldn't actually be worn on noses and what this had to do with military operations. The hologram shifted to show footage of the infamous battle. The alien fleet, arranged in perfect geometric formations that would have made ancient Greek mathematicians weep with joy, faced off against what appeared to be a chaotic scatter of human ships. The accused, Zixel's voice reached new heights of indignation, deliberately positioned their fleet in a pattern that our tactical analysts still cannot decode. It defied all known strategic protocols. "Oh, that," the general waved dismissively. "We based it on an old Earth game called Connect 4, except we played it in 3 dimensions. Really keeps the enemy guessing when your battle formation is based on a children's pastime." Several military attachés in the audience began quietly choking on their various breathing apparatus. The prosecution's next piece of evidence showed the human fleet executing what they termed completely unauthorized maneuvers. Ships spun and weaved in patterns that seemed to ignore both physics and common sense, yet somehow resulted in the complete disruption of the enemy's carefully planned attack formations. The accused's fleet engaged in what they called tactical interpretive dance, Zixel announced, their appendages trembling with barely contained fury. They turned a sacred battle formation into a performance art. "In our defense," the general interjected, "we did submit the choreography for peer review. Not our fault if your command staff couldn't appreciate innovative theater." The holographic display continued, showing the battle's progression. The alien fleet's perfect formations began to break down as they tried to adapt to the humans' apparently random movements. What followed was less of a battle and more of an impromptu dance party, if the dancers were heavily armed warships, and the music was replaced by the sound of tactical officers having nervous breakdowns. But the most egregious violation, Zixel declared, bringing up their prime evidence, was the psychological warfare component. The footage showed human ships broadcasting what appeared to be ancient Earth comedy routines. The confusion this caused among the enemy fleet was palpable. Several ships could be seen trying to maintain formation, while their crews were presumably trying to understand why humans found something called a knock-knock joke so amusing. The accused weaponized humor. Zixel's voice had reached frequencies that made several crystal beings in the audience start to resonate. "They transmitted entertainment during combat. Do you deny this?" "Deny it?" The general looked offended. "We're quite proud of our cultural exchange program. Did you know that 3 species surrendered just so they could get access to our complete collection of stand-up comedy?" The Chief Justice had to use their quantum gavel twice to restore order, as several delegates began arguing about whether human humor should be classified as a weapon of mass distraction. Furthermore, Zixel continued, bringing up another hologram. When faced with a superior force, the accused implemented what they called Operation Mixed Tape, broadcasting Earth music across all frequencies. The footage showed alien ships trying to maintain their precise formations, while their communication channels were flooded with everything from classical symphony to what appeared to be something called disco. Several ships could be seen breaking formation, their movements suggesting their crews were involuntarily moving to the rhythm. The Geneva Convention says nothing about deploying ABBA during combat, the general pointed out helpfully. We checked, thoroughly. The prosecution's next piece of evidence was perhaps the most damning, or would have been, if anyone could understand it. It showed human ships executing maneuvers that seemed to be based on something called interpretive modern dance, complete with spiral formations that made several tactical AI systems crash while trying to predict their next move. The accused's forces refused to follow any recognized combat doctrine, Zixel declared. They treated warfare like some sort of entertainment. Well, the general mused, if you're going to have a war, you might as well make it entertaining. We even started taking requests from the enemy fleet for our music broadcasts. The holographic evidence continued to pile up. Human ships performing what appeared to be synchronized swimming maneuvers in space, tactical formations based on popular Earth sports plays, and at one point, an entire battle group arranging itself into what was apparently a smiley face formation. And perhaps most disturbing of all, Zixel said, their voice dropping to a horrified whisper, they began rating enemy ships' performance on a scale of 1 to 10 and broadcasting the scores during combat. We believe in positive reinforcement, the general explained. You should have seen how much their formations improved after we implemented the scoring system. Some ships even started adding flourishes to their attack runs. The evidence continued to mount. Human ships broadcasting cooking shows during sieges, challenge messages formatted as party invitations, and battle reports written in the style of sports commentaries. The alien judicial panel looked increasingly disturbed as they realized that humans hadn't just failed to take warfare seriously, they'd turned it into entertainment. In conclusion, Zixel announced, their bioluminescence now practically strobing with righteous fury, the accused has systematically undermined the very foundations of civilized warfare. They have introduced elements of chaos, entertainment, and most unforgivably fun into what should be a solemn and properly regulated activity. The general's lieutenant finally looked up from their datapad, their countdown timer showing surprisingly few minutes remaining. The general stood, straightened their uniform, and gave the kind of smile that made several seasoned diplomats reach for their emergency evacuation protocols. Well, they said, if you think our battle strategies were unconventional, wait until you hear about our diplomatic approaches. The Chief Justice's gavel quantum synchronized with their mounting dread. The real show, it seemed, was about to begin. The general's approach to the podium carried all the gravity of someone who'd just been asked to review a particularly amusing joke. The entire chamber held its breath, except for the gaseous collective representatives, who technically couldn't hold their breath, but did manage to achieve a state of anxious molecular stability. Distinguished members of the tribunal, the general began, their voice carrying the kind of pleasant tone usually reserved for discussing weather rather than intergalactic warfare, I'd like to start by thanking you for this wonderful comedy showcase. The translation matrix struggled briefly before giving up entirely on conveying the layers of sarcasm. Several literal mind species began frantically checking their universal translators for malfunction. But since we're here to discuss military strategy, they continued, pulling out what appeared to be an ancient Earth device, a laser pointer, let me explain why your entire understanding of warfare is, to use a technical term, absolutely adorable. The Chief Justice's secondary nervous system began showing early signs of what their species called bureaucratic distress syndrome. You see, the general pointed to the prosecution's own evidence. While you were all busy filing permits for acceptable battle formations, we humans were asking ourselves the really important questions, like, what if we treated space combat like a flash mob? Several alien military advisors began quietly updating their tactical databases, though none would admit to it later. Your first mistake, the general continued, casually advancing through the holographic displays, was assuming that warfare should be predictable. Have you considered that maybe, just maybe, filing flight patterns in triplicate before each engagement might not be the best strategy? The regulatory compliance officers in attendance collectively shifted in their seats, creating a sound similar to 1,000 filing cabinets sighing simultaneously. Let's take Operation Party Crasher as an example, they said, highlighting a particular battle sequence. While your fleet was busy maintaining their geometrically perfect formation, our ships were executing maneuvers based on Earth dance moves from something called the electric slide. Did you know that the resulting chaos actually followed a perfect mathematical pattern? Of course you didn't, because you were too busy filing complaints about our ship's improper spacing. The mathematical specialists in the audience began furiously calculating, only to discover, to their horror, that the general was right. And that psychological warfare you're so upset about? We call that marketing. Your ships were so busy trying to decode hidden meanings in our broadcast of cat videos that they didn't notice we'd repositioned our entire fleet using formations based on classic video game patterns. A junior alien analyst could be heard whispering, by the sacred algorithms they were using, Pac-Man attack formations. But here's the real kicker. The general's smile turned positively predatory. Every single one of our unauthorized tactics was technically legal under your own regulations. We just read the fine print more creatively than you did. They pulled up a holographic copy of the Galactic Combat Regulations, complete with highlighted sections and annotated with what appeared to be doodles in the margins. Section 234.5b clearly states that all combat maneuvers must follow established patterns. It never specified whose established patterns. We simply established new ones, right before each battle, sometimes during. The legal experts in the audience began frantically reviewing their copies of the regulations, their growing horror visible across multiple species worth of facial expressions. And my personal favorite, the general continued, Article 567.8c. All combat communications must maintain professional decorum. Well, we maintained extremely professional standards by entertainment industry standards. Did you know that our battle broadcasts won 3 Galactic Entertainment Awards? The category was Best Comedy Series in an Active War Zone. The prosecution team was now displaying various signs of distress, including molting, spontaneous color changes, and in one case, stress-induced binary fission. But perhaps the most brilliant part of our strategy wasn't our tactics at all. It was watching you try to document them. Do you know how many forms your bureaucrats had to create just to describe our violations? We crashed 3 different filing systems because they couldn't categorize interpretive space battle as a legitimate combat style. The general paused, letting that sink in. Several members of the eternal bureaucracy were now openly weeping into their documentation. And here's the real beauty of it all. While you were all busy trying to regulate, categorize, and file reports about our methods, we were actually winning. Not through superior firepower, not through better technology, but through the simple fact that we refused to play by rules that made no sense in the first place. They gestured to their lieutenant, who had finally put away the countdown timer and was now displaying what appeared to be victory statistics, formatted as entertainment review scores. Our approval ratings were through the roof, by the way. Did you know that enemy morale actually improved during our engagements? We received thank you notes from ships we'd disabled. 3 different species asked for our battle choreography for their cultural archives. The Chief Justice's gavel hand was trembling. The General's expression suggested they were just getting warmed up. "So yes, we violated your protocols. We turned warfare into entertainment. We treated battle formations like dance numbers and combat reports like sports commentary. And do you know what the result was? The shortest, least destructive, most efficiently resolved conflicts in recent galactic history." They pulled up one final holographic display: casualty statistics. The numbers spoke for themselves. Human-led engagements had resulted in significantly fewer deaths, lower property damage, and higher surrender rates than any properly regulated combat in the last century. "So," the General concluded, "you can prosecute me for making warfare too entertaining, too efficient, or too humane. But before you do, I should probably mention that this entire tribunal proceeding is being broadcast live across the galaxy, with our commentary track, of course. We're currently trending on 17 different social media platforms." The lieutenant held up their datapad, showing what appeared to be viewer ratings that would make most entertainment networks weep with joy. "And that's my opening statement. I'd like to thank our sponsors." "Just kidding, but wouldn't that have been fun? Though I should mention that 3 different entertainment conglomerates have already offered to buy the rights to this trial." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the Chief Justice's quantum gavel slipping from their nerveless appendage, and the distinct thud of several legal experts' heads meeting their desks in perfect synchronization. The General sat down, straightened their uniform, and whispered to their lieutenant, "How long do you think before they realize we've turned this tribunal into the highest-rated comedy show in the quadrant?" The lieutenant checked their datapad. "About 3, 2, 1. The chaos that erupted in the tribunal chamber made the previous, unauthorized battle tactics look positively orderly by comparison. The Chief Justice's quantum gavel, still rolling across the floor, had achieved a state of quantum uncertainty, simultaneously resigned and employed. "Order! Order!" Sub-Prosecutor Zixel's bioluminescence had reached frequencies visible in alternate dimensions. "This is a solemn judicial proceeding, not a reality show," the General helpfully supplied, "because according to galactic viewer ratings, we've just surpassed Dancing with the Stellar Powers and Keeping Up with the Kardashians, Interstellar Edition." The lieutenant's datapad now displayed a live feed of social media reactions. Hashtags like #HumanWarfare, #TacticalDanceOff, and #JusticeGoneWild were trending across 17,000 star systems. One by one, the judges began removing their ceremonial robes, each garment weighted with exactly 47 medals of judicial merit. The Chief Justice's third brain had gone into emergency shutdown, while their first 2 were locked in an existential debate about career choices. "Before you all leave," the General announced to the rapidly disintegrating panel, "I should mention that we've received 16 offers for movie rights, 27 proposals for documentary series, and 1 very interesting pitch for a reality show called So You Think You Can War Crime." The eternal bureaucracy representatives were now trying to eat their documentation, a known panic response among their species. The literal translation corps had given up entirely and was instead publishing poetry about the absurdity of human military doctrine. "Oh, and my personal favorite," the General continued, seemingly oblivious to the breakdown of galactic judicial order around them. "We've been nominated for Best Comedy of the Year by the Intergalactic Entertainment Association. The category is Unintentional Humor in Formal Proceedings." The Chief Justice finally found their voice, though it had shifted up several octaves. This is unprecedented." "Actually," the lieutenant interjected, not looking up from their datapad, "according to Article 789.4d of the Galactic Broadcasting Rights Agreement, this entire proceeding falls under public performance art due to its live transmission status. We're legally classified as entertainment now." The prosecution team had begun a spontaneous metamorphosis. a stress response that would leave them in larval form for approximately 3 solar cycles. The defense table, meanwhile, had been transformed into an impromptu merchandising display, complete with "I survived the Human War Tribunal" t-shirts. "And before I forget," the general added, "we've already trademarked Tactical Interpretive Dance as a fitness program. The instructional videos go on sale next week." The last remaining judge, a quantum consciousness housed in a crystalline matrix, finally spoke. "In light of these developments, we have no choice but to—" "Wait," the general interrupted. "Before you dismiss the charges, would you mind doing it with a bit more flair?" Our choreographer suggested a dramatic pause, followed by a slow-motion robe removal. The ratings spike would be astronomical. That was the final straw. The quantum judge achieved enlightenment through sheer exasperation and ascended to a higher plane of existence, leaving behind only a small note that read, "I quit," in 17 different languages. The Chief Justice, now sporting a 1,000-yard stare that seemed to peer into alternate dimensions where justice made sense, managed one final declaration. "This tribunal is. They glanced at the lieutenant's datapad showing the viewer ratings. "Going on indefinite hiatus pending a complete review of our entertainment licensing agreements." As the chamber erupted into what could only be described as organized chaos, the human delegation had somehow arranged for background music, the general stood one last time. "Thank you all for participating in this groundbreaking fusion of military history and entertainment. Special thanks to our viewers across the galaxy, the regulatory compliance officers who'll be spending the next decade rewriting the definition of warfare, and of course, our wonderful judges, whose resignation letters have already been optioned for a dramatic reading series." The lieutenant's final datapad display showed the aftermath statistics. 9 resigned judges, 347 broken regulations, 1,000+ merchandise pre-orders, 1 very successful rating sweep, infinite bureaucratic headaches. As the human delegation departed the chamber, leaving behind a trail of business cards from entertainment executives, the general was overheard saying, "You know, I think we just proved that the pen isn't just mightier than the sword, it's also better at ratings." The lieutenant nodded, already scheduling meetings with producers. "Should we tell them about our plans for the peace treaty negotiations?" "Let's save that for the sequel," the general replied with a wink. "I'm thinking diplomatic dance-off, the peace talks." Somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of space, a form was being filed to classify the entire incident as an unprecedented entertainment success with unfortunate judicial side effects. It was filed under H for humans, why we can't have nice, orderly things, and thus ended the great Galactic War Tribunal, not with a bang, but with a punchline that would echo through the cosmos for generations to come. The only question that remained was whether the after-party would require its own judicial review.